back down, Boots. We actually had people today, and I totally spazzed out the recording. Sometimes my brain's an interesting spot. You guys know that. Let's get right to it. So what I wanted to do today is one of the Jatakas. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the Jataka, the Maha Vanija Jataka, which is essentially on moderation. Right? I wanted to do that because, let's be honest, we partied a lot. We've had a couple of weeks of New Year's services in a row. It's about time to say, maybe push back, maybe hold back a little bit, right? And so, moderation it is. So it was while staying at Jetavana that the Buddha told this story about traders. Note that's the commercial people, not Benedict Arnold. Right. Once a group of traders visited Jetavana before setting out on a long journey. These men paid their respects to the Buddha, offered gifts, and took the refuges and precepts. Venerable Sir, they said, if we return safely, we will come again to Jetavana and bow at your feet. The next day they left Savatthi with 500 cartloads of merchandise. After a few days, they arrived at the edge of the dense jungle, where the road was poorly marked. Following the trail as best they could, they entered the jungle, but soon became hopelessly lost. As they wandered aimlessly through the jungle, they quickly used up all their water and ate all their provisions. Suddenly, they came upon a clearing, in the middle of which stood a huge banyan tree. Yay! Exhausted and afraid that they would all perish in the jungle, they unyoked their carts and sat down beneath the tree. As they rested, sitting around the trunk of the magnificent tree, one of the traders noted that the leaves were very glossy. He's paying attention. He continued examining the parts of the tree, and after a few minutes exclaimed, "My friends, look at this tree. Both the leaves and the branches seem to be moist. Doesn't it look as though water is actually running through the tree? Let's try cutting a branch. We might find something to drink. I'm certainly thirsty enough to try anything at this point." Finding a saw in one of the wagons, they gave it to another of their group and sent him up the tree. He climbed onto a stout limb and sawed off a small branch on the eastern side of the tree. A stream of water gushed forth like a waterfall. All of the men drank their fill and rejoiced. Then they watered the oxen who were languishing in the coarse brush, weeds around the tree. The fresh water was still flowing, so they all bathed and thoroughly refreshed themselves. Curious as to see what would happen, they sent the man up a second time with the saw and asked him to cut off a branch on the southern side of the tree. Out came all sorts of delicious food. Everyone ate as much as he could, and still food remained. Right? When the man used his saw to cut off a branch on the western side of the tree, out stepped a bevy of lovely women who greeted the men, sang, and entertained them. Royally, actually. Entertained them royally. So this is a really nice show. Finally, they told the man to cut off a branch on the northern side of the tree, and they were showered with precious stones. The men all worked together to unload the merchandise they carried and to fill the carts with the gems. Well further than they could ever have imagined, they retraced their steps through the jungle and returned safely to Savatthi. After carefully unloading their treasure and placing it in their storerooms, the traders took garlands and incense to Jetavana. They made their offerings to the Buddha, paid their respects, and sat down to one side to listen to the Dhamma. The next day, they offered lunch to the Buddha and the bhikkhus and gave many gifts as well. As they made their donations, the traders declared, "Venerable Sir, we renounce all merit from these gifts. May it be granted to the deity of the great banyan tree in the jungle. That deity not only saved our lives, but also bestowed on us all the treasure that we brought back to Savatthi." When the meal was finished, the Buddha asked the traders to tell him the details of their adventure and relate all that had happened. "You received this treasure because of your moderation," the Buddha replied. "We're wise not to be avaricious. Long ago, when this same thing happened, men were overwhelmed by greed. At their request, the Buddha told this story of the past. Long, long ago, a group of traders lost their way in the same jungle and rested under the same banyan tree. At that time, the tree was home to a mighty Naga king. Everything happened in exactly the same way, except that after the ground was covered with precious gems, one of the traders, sad sack, exclaimed, Why should we wait for these gems to come trickling out of this little branch? Let's cut down the tree at the root and dig out all the treasure. Yeah, great plan there, pal. My friend, replied the leader of the caravan, what harm does this banyan do? This bounteous tree has granted us water, food, lovely women, and wealth beyond measure. Why would you cut it down? One that provides pleasant shade should not suffer for its hospitality. The other traders rose up and shouted down the leader, who was the only one to urge restraint. The leader walked away sadly and sat at a distance from the magnificent banyan tree. The others sharpened their axes and gathered around the massive trunk. The Naga king had been listening to all of this and shouted, though none of them could hear him, those ingrates! I gave them water when they were thirsty, food when they were famished, maidens when they were lonely, and enough treasure to fill 500 wagons. Now they have the audacity to cry, let's cut down the tree at the root. They are greedy beyond all endurance. Except for the leader, they must all die. The Naga king summoned his army. Strike down those men, he ordered. Spare only the leader. Burn them to cinders. He's not playing around. He is serious here. At the moment the traders lifted their axes, mighty Naga warriors attacked them and slew every one before a single axe could fall. Then the Nagas loaded the gems into the 500 wagons and escorted the leader out of the jungle and back to his home. After they had secured all the treasure in his storeroom, they returned to the Naga realm. Having concluded his story, the Buddhist added, the wise man sees his own good and never succumbs to the power of greed. Understanding the pain that comes from desire, he shakes off greed and aspires to live a contented, virtuous life. Thus, laymen, those traders who were destroyed because of their greed. Then the Buddha taught the Dhamma, and all the traders attained the first path. Finally, the Buddha identified the birth. At that time, Shariputra was the king of the Nagas, and I was the caravan leader. Okay. So, really what we see here, and I mean, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, call me out in the comments, that's fine. We see the Buddha giving a nice little moral story about why you don't be greedy, right? Why greed is not your friend, right? And so we see this first group, we've got the two groups, right? We see the first group, and they're doing the right thing. They get themselves lost. It happens, right? They have 0 land nav skills. They may as well be lieutenants, right? Hey, I was a lieutenant. I can make that joke because that was me a while ago, several years ago. But so they have 0 land nav skills and they get themselves lost, and then they are rescued by this really awesome tree, right? Which has this really awesome spirit connected to it, and they do the right thing, right? They don't get greedy. They don't say, oh, hey, let's totally take everything we can. They say, okay, we're going to take as much as we need, and we're going to roll up, right? They did that with the food. They did that with the water, right? They took care of, the water was still flowing, and they didn't want to waste it, so they fed their oxen, and they bathed and cleaned themselves up, and said, enough's enough. Right? They did that with the food. They ate as much as they could and then said, no more. And there was still plenty of food coming out. Same thing with the maidens, right? Same thing with the jewels. They took as much as they could, as much as they needed, right? As much as they could carry. But they didn't go that next step. They didn't say, let's totally tear this down so we can get more, right? They didn't do that. And we see in the second group, we see that they did do that, right? So the first group can be thought of as good leaders. They do enough without doing too much. They push just enough without pushing too hard. They do enough that they get what they do what they need. But they don't do everything that they want. They're not arrogant, they're not greedy, they're not selfish, they're not stuck in in what we might call toxicity, or just plain bad leadership, they're not trying to do more than they have to. They're not trying they're not going out of their way to say, oh no, we're totally going to do all this stuff because that way I can justify my OER or my NCOER. They're saying instead, no, we're going to do what we need to, but we're not going to push past where we have to, right? And we see this a lot throughout history, right? You see good generals daring to march, but daring also to halt. We see good generals saying, okay, we need to go here, we need to do this, but we're not going to push past what we have to do, right? We have to do this because that's what our orders say, but we're not going to go further. We're not going to deliberately hurt others. We're not going to destroy our moral foundation by pushing, by being greedy, by wanting more. This other group that the Buddha was talking about, they did that, right? They tried to cut down the tree, and it destroyed them, right? So with that group, it destroyed them physically as well as morally. I mean, they were already morally gone, but they were destroyed physically, right? Leaders, bad leaders, leaders who fail at leadership, don't stop. They don't have that off button. They don't have that, okay, we have reached what we were sent to do. We did our jobs. We're not pushing past that. They said, nope, we're pushing past that because we want to. Because we want. And that greed, right, that avarice, that desire destroys those leaders, right? It may not destroy them physically, although it could, but it certainly destroys them morally and ethically, right? And so you see these two different groups that the Buddha is talking about, right? The one that obviously he's sitting there talking to and saying, you guys did good. You didn't push too far. You didn't get greedy. You didn't desire all of this. You didn't want. You didn't try to get all of these things, right? You didn't try to get all of these NCOER bullets, all these OER bullets. You didn't try to glorify yourself or yourselves. This other group did, right? And they paid the price. With greed, you always pay the price. The result is always bad with greed. It may not be right away. Short term, you may not see the results. But long term, you have destroyed yourself. If you're going to sit there and take the greedy path, if you're going to take the avaricious path, if you're going to give in to that desire, to that temptation, right? And we all have that temptation within us. We all have within us that ability to say, we can totally cut down this tree and just make it easy for ourselves, and we'll just take everything we want. We all have that desire. We all have that temptation. We have to have the discipline. We have to have the moral fortitude to say, no, we don't need that. We're not going to do it. Right? And as Dhamma Buddhas, why wouldn't we do that? Right? Why wouldn't we say, nope, that's enough. That's enough. We're not pushing past this. We're not trying. We're not going to go further than we absolutely have to, right? We're going to do what we have to, but we're not going to go past it. We're not going to sit there and give in to that desire. We're not going to be so undisciplined that we would say, you know what? I want. We as Dhamma Buddhas have the capacity to not only live the moral life, right? To not only try as best we can, to not only do all of this non-greedy, non-desirous, non-avaricious stuff, right? We have the capacity also to inspire others to do the same. We have within us the ability to say, I am not going to push past, and I'm not going to recommend it to anybody who wants to. It's up to us to say, I have the discipline to say no. I have the discipline to not push past what I have to. That's on us. I'm going to leave it to you guys I'm gonna leave it to you guys down the woods. Practice that. Put that into practice. Give that some thought. Reflect on how you are leading by your example. Reflect on how you can have the discipline to step back and say, nope, not doing it. I don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. Reflect on how you can do that. How you, in your situation, can best do that. All right, I'm gonna leave it there, Don Boots. As always, Don Boots salute.